Welcome back. Okay, power rankings for this week. I'm wearing Detroit. I'm wearing their old Detroit. This is Falcons, right? Detroit Falcons. I mean, it's a Red Wings throwback, and it's a Steve Eiserman and all that. So, because you can kind of see with the work ethic that Detroit has right now that there's a lot of Eiserman's fingerprints on this. Now you'll notice as well that it's numbered 1 through 30. So 31 this week is the same as it was last week. So we'll start off with that talking point, which is the Vancouver Canucks still not being ranked. They will be ranked next week. They're supposed to come back next Friday. And they do have a lot of games over a short period of time. And I know there are people who are complaining. There are people who are saying, what's the point? You know what? The more I read that, the more I think, you know what? I'm really going to jump as hard onto that bandwagon as possible. And if they lose every game, okie dokie. But, you know, I'm going to be glad to see them back on the ice. And honestly, I really hope they do well. And if they don't, that's just fine too. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. But for Vancouver, they're going to be shorthanded when they come back. They've also announced that even though they're coming back next Friday, not every player will be recovered enough to actually be on the ice. Some of these players are going to be out for a longer period. So again, you know, hopefully they all come back to full health. They're all able to play before the season's out. But we'll see them back on the ice tomorrow for practice. And then Friday is when they start playing again. So they've got from Sunday until Friday to try to get back up to speed. And then they get the Oilers, who are going to be well rested from having played tonight. So, yeah. Probably angry with the result tonight, too. So, great. You know, a lot of finger guns on that game. All right, so that preamble aside, we're going to get into number 30. This team went 1-2 this week. They're now 9-25-6. And that's Buffalo. So Buffalo's still 30th. I had hoped that we might see them move up before the season's over. I'm starting to think that's probably not going to happen. We've got 4 more power rankings left after this one. So after that, and if I want to say this too, if the Northern Division plays beyond the end of the other 3 divisions, which is likely to happen, once the playoffs have started for any division, I'm not doing power rankings. So even if 3 divisions are still regular seasons and regular season 1 isn't, power rankings doesn't work because there's playoffs going on, so it just doesn't work. So Buffalo, we'll see whether or not they can move up before the season's out. If they can, it'll probably be at the expense of this team, which went 1-1-1 this week. They're now 12-22-7, and that's Anaheim. So Anaheim, they're number 8 in the West still. And for the Ducks, you know, they're playing out the string. Zegras got sent down. I thought it was interesting. I'm listening to the commentators tonight. I'm trying to remember which game it was on. But it was one that I know they don't watch the Ducks. They were talking about how Zegras only had the 1 goal, and that's why you don't rush a guy into the NHL, and he wasn't ready. And I thought, he was fine. It really wasn't him that was costing Anaheim games. He was fine. He was playing well. There's more to measure a rookie on than by goal scoring. But again, I guess that's the measure that a lot of people use, and that's where the word bust comes out of. But I thought Zegras was fine. So I agree with putting him in the minors so he can play in all situations and play top minutes, but he played fine. Number 28. This team drops 2 spots. They lost 3 games out of 4 that they played this week. They're 15-20-8, and I have them in 28th because I think they're done, and that's Columbus. What I saw from them tonight was just, and that means they're 8th in the Central. It's the first time they've been 8th in the Central that I can think of this season. They look to be going through the motions. They had a lead on Chicago, and then it was just gone. I don't know how many other players are going to be gone out of Columbus by Monday, but I'd be surprised if Foligno's still there past Monday. I'd kind of be surprised if he's still there when I wake up tomorrow. So Columbus is now fully into the, selling off and thinking about next year. And so for that reason, I have them at 28th, and the fact that their recent record is not really very good either. So number 27, this team lost all 4 games they played this week, but they don't move up, they don't move down. Their overall record is 13-25-4, and that's the Ottawa Senators. So for the Sens, again, they're competitive. They're in these games. They're not getting blown out in most cases. Tonight, for instance, they made it a 1-goal game in the end against Toronto. They didn't make it easy on them. And, Connor Brown's on a 7-game goal streak. I think Forsberg's playing relatively well. Tonight was iffy, but He's been relatively good, especially considering he's not wearing pads that match his Ottawa gear. It's as if he doesn't plan to be a Senator for very long, or maybe they told him, don't bother getting new gear. I don't know. I don't have any access to that information. Just throwing that out there. But yeah, Ottawa number 27. They're the effort's there, but again, it's a matter of we're waiting until next year, and there's a lot of good pieces coming in next year, and we'll see how it goes for them. Number 26. These guys move up 2 spots. Now, I can't prove that this is the highest they've been this year, because I don't think it is. But they went 2-1-1 this week. They move up 2 spots. And you know what? Detroit, the effort is always there. You always get a good effort with Detroit. And I think the results, have started getting better. Greiss has started to get some better results as well, which is good. Because, while, yes, his stats may have been beefed up a little bit by playing with the Islanders, he's not that bad as he's looked in Detroit. Like, it's been ridiculous. So the fact that his stats have started to get a little better, he's won a few games here and there, at least that helps a little bit. But, yeah, we'll see what else Detroit does before the deadline. We know they're selling. And Bobby Ryan going on to the injured reserve list till the end of the season. That hurts because I'm sure they were planning on moving him at the deadline. So we'll see how many they move. But the difference to me between Columbus and Detroit, and the reason for the flip, is because with Detroit, we're still getting 100% effort for 60 minutes, 65 minutes into the shootout. With Columbus, it just feels like the wind's gone right out of their sails. Speaking of which, number 25. These guys went 1-3 this week. They're now 14, 19, and 6. They dropped 7 spots because it feels like the wind's gone out of their sails, as well as New Jersey. So New Jersey's been pretty high up. They've been pretty competitive, but the trade deadline, losing Palmieri, losing Zajac, that's a loss for them. It does help the kids. It does mean that the kids get more ice time, they get more responsibility, but it also probably means more losses between now and the end of the season, which is just fine if you're New Jersey. That's the plan. Any team in this column, I would even argue, including Vancouver, is looking at the draft and saying, all right, so where are we going to draft? What are we going to look at? What's going to happen with the 2021 draft? So the teams in this aisle, I think, are all looking at the draft and mailing it in for this season. Number 24, not mailing it in for this season. They're 1-2 this week. They're now 17, 21, and 3. They stay in the same spot they were last week, and that's Calgary. So Calgary doesn't move up. They don't move down. They're still 5th in the division on this board here. The win over Edmonton, do you take anything from that? Like, Edmonton clearly was gassed. They were done. By the time you reached the third period, they were running on fumes. I don't know. But all I know is they got the win. Montreal lost in regulation, so there's hope. It's faint. It's very small. It's the same faint hope that Vancouver has. But it's still there. And so for Calgary, it's a good win. There's a shutout for Markstrom. There's a lot of feel-good moments. We'll see whether or not they can build on it. But I didn't move them up, and I didn't move them down. Number 23. These guys moved down 2 spots. They went 2-2 this week. They're 16, 18, and 6. And they're running out of runway. That's the Kings. So for the Kings, they split their series with San Jose. They're splitting series here and there. Now they get Vegas next on Monday. I don't know. I don't think they have it in them to go on a run and get that number 4 spot. But that number 4 spot has been so up for grabs in that division. And every time it looks like a team might be able to solidify that spot, they fall apart. So maybe the Kings get in there. I don't think so. I think they're too far back. But again, for the Kings, I have them 23rd. They had a 500 week. They need more than that. They need to be better than 500 if they're going to get anywhere near the playoffs. Number 22. These guys went 500 this week. They went 2-2. They're now 15, 14, and 10. They move up 1 spot from last week, and that's Dallas. For Dallas, much the same as LA. They need to be better than just 500 and just maintaining. They need to be better because Nashville's been better, and tomorrow they get Nashville. So we'll see how things go for them with Nashville. That to me is the proving ground. That's the one where if Dallas can come out tomorrow and if they can beat Nashville, say 4-1 or 5-2, something along those lines, then yeah, we're talking about a team that may very well be able to sneak into that spot, but it's not going to be easy. Nashville, even though they lost tonight against Tampa, they played well, and they should be kind of ornery tomorrow as a result. So I would especially watch the first 10 minutes if I was Dallas. They may have a lot of energy right out of the gate. Number 21, dropping 2 spots from last week. They went 2-2. They're now 19, 17, and 5, and they've gone from, hey, they should be 4th in the division to, I don't know. That's Arizona. So Arizona had a nice little streak going. They were doing well. And then, I don't know. I don't know what to expect with Arizona from one night to the next, or even from one period to the next. Against Vegas, they're losing 5-0. They end up losing 7-4. They showed a great amount of comeback, and Kessel in the third period's fantastic. I don't know what to expect. So they drop a couple of spots from last week because they got passed. And we'll see whether or not they can survive that battle for 4th. Because your guess is as good as mine on that one. I'm not even going to try. Number 20, moving up 5 spots from last week. I almost wore their jersey for this video tonight. Normally it's for the team that climbs the most, but I'm wearing Detroit because Detroit's 26th. That's pretty heady territory if you're Detroit, right? They're 2 spots away from being in this column, and it's possible they get there by the end of the year. But moving up 5 spots, they ended up 2-1-1 this week. They're now 19, 15, and 6 overall. That's Philly. Philadelphia, we've wondered if they're done numerous times this year. They've had some really rough games, but they seem to bounce back. They seem to be resilient, and we'll see. Hart's numbers haven't been as bad over the last couple of starts as they were. Elliott had a pretty good game today against Boston, a Boston team that again started to look like they were going to struggle with goal scoring. I don't know. But I moved Philadelphia up because they only lost 1 in regulation out of 4, and I felt that they were playing better than the teams that are currently behind them on this board. Number 19, moving up 1 spot from last week, even though they lost 2 out of 3. So they lose 2 out of 3, but I still feel that they end up moving up that 1 spot because they passed Arizona. So I have them ahead of Arizona, and that's San Jose. It was a tough loss tonight against the Kings. It was. And we'll see whether or not San Jose can stay in the mix. They're right in that no man's land where they might stay, they might not. I didn't bump them down based on the loss to the Kings. I thought, no, Philadelphia already moves up 5 spots. I'll leave them where they were at. We'll see what happens with Philadelphia tomorrow against Buffalo. They should be able to beat Buffalo. Should be able to, right? And then I can, probably switch those 2 tomorrow if Philadelphia pulls that one off based on the week San Jose's had too. But I didn't want to do that tonight. We'll see whether or not San Jose can have some upward momentum. Again, 1 and 2 this week. A little bit troubling, but there were teams around them that didn't have necessarily fantastic records either. But number 18, moving up 4 spots from last week. They won 3 out of 4. I would like to say you're welcome to that fan base because since I did the video on St. Louis, they're unbeaten. They've won 3 in a row, including the absolute destruction of the Minnesota Wild in that first game. And then tonight they beat them in overtime. So for St. Louis, they're showing that resilience. They're showing that desperate hockey that you want. And right now they're in the driver's seat for 4th spot. Thus, they're back in 4th spot on the board in their division, in my eyes. And they've got 3rd in their sights. Because, again, they've won 3 in a row. They've been very impressive in those 3 games. And it feels like everything's starting to click on all cylinders. St. Louis has been a matter of maintaining it, where they get that run going, and then it'll just kind of fall apart on them. They need this run to continue. And if it does, then yeah, Arizona probably will not be able to catch them. San Jose probably not going to be able to catch them because, if St. Louis is winning a majority of their games, they should get it. It's their spot right now. But we'll see whether or not they can hold on to it. Number 17. These guys went 1 and 3 this week. So they lost 3 out of 4. I dropped them 2 spots. I'm not dropping them too far yet. We'll see whether or not next week is as rough as this week. And that's Montreal. So I've got Montreal at 17. So they're number 4 in the Canadian division because numbers 5 and 6 are Calgary and Ottawa, and both of them are losing a bunch of games. So for the top 3 teams in the North, they've been winning a lot lately, and that's at the expense of the bottom 3 teams in the North, right? So for Montreal, rough week. Tonight's game against Winnipeg was a really rough game, drops them down to the 3rd column. And again, if St. Louis keeps it up, if Philadelphia keeps it up, If Montreal has another bad week, they could find themselves down as low as, say, 20th or 21st next week. But again, odds are they'll probably still be ahead of Calgary. They'll be ahead of Ottawa unless Ottawa goes on a huge run. They should get that fourth spot. They really, really should. But 3 regulation losses has to leave Calgary and Vancouver thinking, doors open. Even if it's just a little bit. Number 16, these guys move up 1 spot this week. They end up 2-1 this week. They're now 19, 18, and 5. And they've been kind of up and down recently, and that's Chicago. So Chicago's back in the first 2 columns. They're 5th in their division in the Central, which is where they are in the actual standings as well. And that's a problem. They didn't have a bad week, but they find themselves behind Nashville. The good news is they beat Columbus. Nashville loses their game against the Tampa Bay Lightning. So they're still in this, and there's still that opportunity for them to pass the Nashville Predators. And if Chicago makes the playoffs, I wouldn't rule out a first-round upset. I would not rule out a first-round upset with Chicago Blackhawks involved. Just because they're the Chicago Blackhawks. And you know that at playoff time, they're all of a sudden going to be like, hey, and look, Jonathan Toews is here. He's fine, everybody. And then Toews goes on a run, and everybody goes nuts, and all the conspiracies start running wild. So, yeah, that I'm looking forward to that. That's gonna be great. Number 15. These guys move up 1 spot from last week. They went 2-1. They're now 19, 16, and 5. And they're in this. They are, and that's the Rangers. The Rangers, absolutely, while they're going back and forth with Philly over who's going to end up in 5th. 4th is not completely out of reach. Before the Boston game today, I was listening to Brickley and Edwards, and they were talking about the standings. And, Boston could look at the teams ahead of them. The teams behind them, though, are pretty far behind. And I'm like, it's the same separation between the teams behind them and the teams ahead of them. It's the same. Like, yeah, they have games in hand, but you have to win the games in hand, right? So the Rangers are in this, and things are going pretty well. Panarin's doing really well. Lafreniere's started to pick up his scoring. Good games for their goaltenders. Don't rule out the New York Rangers. They've been on a nice little run recently. Number 14. They went 2-1-1 this week. They don't move up. They don't move down. They're now 21, 11, and 6, and that's Boston. Boston, it's been odd how Boston, some games they look great and everything's clicking, and in other games they just look completely offensively gone and done. And they have their first line, and then every other line, there's just not the offense there. Jake DeBrusk showed signs today. The Bruins need more than that. They need more from their depth guys than what they've been getting over the last month or so. This is a Boston team that I would be very surprised if they survived the first round. They get into the first round if they're against a team like the Caps, Pens, the Islanders, whichever of the 3 draws the number 4 seed. I just can't see how they'd knock them off. I don't think they have the offense to do it. And I don't know if over a 7-game series they have the goaltending to do it right now either. Rask's been hurt. Halak's been good, not great. And then you've got Vladar and Swayman. And I don't think either of those are ready to go into a 7-game series against an Ovechkin or a Crosby or Barry Trotz's team. Yeah. So for Boston, I have some concerns. Number 13. These guys went 2-1 this week. They're 22, 19, and 1 now. They stay in the same spot as last week, and that's Nashville. So one thing that happens as the season goes along, especially as we get up to the point where we're like 4 weeks out from the playoffs now, it's more likely teams aren't going to move up a lot or move down a lot because you acquire a lot of poor games or a lot of great games, and so it's harder for me to say, well, they had a bad week, so I'm going to drop them all the way down to 10th or 12th. I just don't see that works. So for me, Nashville, who had a decent week, I keep them in 13th. I still think there's 12 teams ahead of them, but they've gone on the run lately. And if they can beat Dallas tomorrow, they are that much closer. They are that much closer to solidifying that 4th spot. And I really think that is what's going to happen. I'd be very surprised if Nashville doesn't get it. Again, I think it's between Nashville and Chicago. And, yeah, we'll see what Dallas does, too, on Monday, I guess. It's possible they make some moves. Number 12. These guys dropped 2 spots from last week. They went 1-2-1. They're now 24, 13, and 3. I try not to overreact. And that's why Minnesota only drops 2 spots. because, again, they get absolutely destroyed by St. Louis. But that's one game. So I try really hard not to overreact to how one game turns out. And then, they get the overtime loss tonight. But they played well. And, they did get the point out of that one. And they had the win before that. So for Minnesota, it's really a matter of consistency. Their consistency just isn't there. So they fall back a bit because the consistency hasn't been where you want it to be. They're still the third place team in that division. I can't see them falling out of that third spot unless St. Louis is on a huge run. And remember, St. Louis still has 5 games left against Minnesota, including one on Monday. So St. Louis can make up some more ground on Minnesota and make Minnesota's life a little more miserable. It's up to Minnie to come out in the next game and really shut them down. Number 11, I should say. That was 12. Number 11, staying in the same spot as last week. They went 2-1-1 this week. They're 25-15-2. And that's the Oilers. So they win 2 out of 4 this week. I still have them third in the division. Obviously, they were gassed against the Calgary Flames tonight. So I bumped Calgary into this column. I didn't really mess around with the Oilers much. I left them basically where they were at the start of the day. The top 10, top 11 teams, really the top 12, playing pretty well overall. Again, consistency can be a bit of an issue. The Oilers, of course, don't play again until Friday. I expect them to come back on Friday ready to play and well-rested, which is what they need. Hopefully, over the next 6 days, they get a couple of days to just rest at home and, and get their energy back. And then they'll be good to go for their next game. But I still have them in 11th. 10th place, dropping 1 spot from last week. They went 2-1 during this week. They're 26-11-4 overall. And that's the New York Islanders. The Islanders went 2 out of 3. They just dropped the 1 spot. I still have them third in the East. And again, when you look at the divisions, teams aren't really moving up and down that much. The overall 1-31 they do, but not that much in the divisions. So the Islanders, there's some concerns? There were some concerns with what I saw with the Rangers game, sure. But overall, this was just a matter of, a team passed them that had a really good week. Otherwise, the Islanders would have been in the exact same spot. If not for this one team having a really good week, they would still be in 9th place. So which team had the really good week? Which team ended up in 9th? The team that ends up in 9th, they went 3-0 this week. They're now 25-13-3, and that's Winnipeg. So the Jets move back up to 9th. Now here's what's interesting with that. Winnipeg was 9th 2 weeks ago. They dropped to 12th last week, and now they're back up to 9th. So there's a spot there, and that happens with these power rankings too, where some teams will just get a range that they're in. When the season's done, and I think it'll end up being 16 weeks of power rankings, I'm going to do a madness board where I get into it, and I'm going to enjoy doing that. That's why I have all these papers that has all these weeks of power rankings. So the Jets, to me, that's kind of the sweet spot, is between 9 and 12. Are they a contender? I don't know that they're a Stanley Cup contender, but they've got a pretty good record. I will say that I do think they're the second best team in that division, and we'll see at the end of the season, and we get into the playoffs, whether or not they can win in the playoffs and maybe be that team that makes it to the semifinals. Whichever team makes it to the semifinals, there's going to be a lack of respect from some in the media, because of the idea that these Canadian teams, they don't play defense. They're not as tough as some of the American contenders, and so they've had an easier schedule by playing against each other. That's out there. So it's going to be up to whichever team from Canada ends up emerging as the team in the semifinals to prove that that's not accurate. Number 8, actually. Keep in mind, this is my 8th video of the day. I think it's my 7th or 8th, some ridiculous number of videos, and the power rankings being the last video of the night, and then tomorrow it could be a lot of videos too, because we have games during the day, and then we have, of course, the trade deadlines. So there could be all kinds of trades. Could be trades going on right now while I'm talking to all you fine people. Number 8, dropping 1 spot from last week. They went 2-1 this week as well. They just got passed. They're 26-13-2, and that's Pittsburgh. So for the Pittsburgh Penguins, I've got them in the top column, in and amongst the contending teams. And again, with Pittsburgh, I really think we're at a stage where it's going to be what they do in the playoffs. Whatever they do in the regular season is great. It's gravy. But when you get to the postseason, because 2018, 2019, 2020, the way they exit the playoffs, it tends to go downhill fast for them. They need to show in 2021 that is changing. And so for Pittsburgh, they're still top 8. I don't think they're going to fall out of the top 8 unless something dramatic happens before the end of the season. I think that's probably where they're going to end up. I would say probably between 5 and 8 at the end of the year. But we'll see, right? But yeah, the playoffs are really going to tell the story with Pittsburgh. Number 7, dropping 2 spots from last week. They went 1-3. And again, it's a matter of trying not to overreact because these guys have had a really good season. And today they had a pretty good game. They just they got outscored early. 26-12-4 now is the record, and that's Florida. So for the Florida Panthers, maybe this is that break. We've talked all year about how there's a 3-headed monster at the top of the Central. Maybe that 1-3 record this week shows that Florida's the team that's going to fall. And it'll be between Carolina and Tampa in the end to decide who wins the division. Not saying that necessarily will happen, but it could. Another rough week for Florida this coming week, and it is possible they find themselves down as low as 9th or maybe 10th. Again, with the really good record they have, I can't see myself dropping them too far down. But, yeah, I mean, the game against Dallas was a matter of them playing against a really desperate Dallas team that really needed the win. So maybe that played a large role in it. Bobrovsky had a rough start to it too. So again, we'll see how things go for Florida. Number 6, the team that passed both of them. They went 2-1 this week. They're now 26-11-2. Almost said 11-12. That's not a thing. That's Vegas. So Vegas had a decent week. Definitely troubling the way that game against Arizona ends, but they won it. So when they win a game, it's not like I'm going to go, well, I don't like how that went. I'm going to drop them. No. So I've got Vegas back up to number 6. They're not top 5, but they're knocking on the door. And tomorrow they've got Arizona, so we'll see if they're able to beat Arizona without the comeback. So the 5-0 lead was great, and then there was that comeback and made you kind of wonder towards the end there. But, yeah, Vegas held on to that, and we'll see how things go for them tomorrow. Number 5, dropping 1 spot from last week. They went 2-2 this week. They're now 26-11-4, and that's Washington. So for the Caps, it's a pretty tight division, in all honesty. So they're the number 1 team in the East, the number 5 on the board. You've got 5 as the East, 8 is in the East, 10 is in the East, 14, 15 is in the East, 20. So Eastern teams are pretty good. Buffalo's 30, New Jersey's 25. Outside of those 2, the next one you find at 20. So, and that's 6th in the division. So it's been a tight division. The Capitals right now are still the number 1 team in that division. They end up dropping 1 spot because there was a team that had a really good week. And I know I keep saying it, but it's true. A lot of these teams have stayed relatively stable and relatively in the same spot. Just one team pegs it off. And it's interesting because I update this every night, and then I look at the power rankings on Saturday and I go, oh, they ended up right where they started, or at least close. Where they move around, I'm like, wow, that's fascinating. Like Tampa at one point this week, it looked like they were going to really drop, and then they finished the week off pretty well. So that didn't happen. But it would be funny if I did the power rankings on, say, a Wednesday. They were completely different, right? And then I had like the Wednesday. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to like start doing power rankings for each day of the week and then let's measure where each team is in each day of the week. No, that's a little much. Number 4, Carolina went 2-1-1 this week, but they dropped 3 spots. So for Carolina, again, they win 2 out of 4 this week. And it's not as much that they had a bad week. They had an okay week. It wasn't a fantastic week. And again, you know, they end up losing in a shootout to Detroit. And the 3 teams that I have ahead of them, I thought had a better week than they did. So Carolina ends up dropping. They were number 1 last week. They end up dropping out of that number 1 spot this week. Or no, they weren't number. Were they? Okay, well, if they were number 1. No, they were number 3 last week. They were number 1 the week before that. Look at that. I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah, they were number 1 the week before that. Sorry about that. They were number 3 last week. See, I didn't even read my notes properly. It's so late. All right, so number 4, down 1 spot from last week. They went 2-1-1 this week. And, yeah, so they They had the same kind of week that Washington did, in that there was another team that had a good week. And by now that fan base is going, how high up are we? Number 3, they went 2-2 this week. They dropped 1 spot as well, so it's the same order as last week, and that's Tampa. So there's the Central. You've got 3, you've got 4, you've got 7, and then you're all the way down to 13 to find the next team in that division. Then there's 16, and Tampa is still the best team in the division, and a lot of that has to do with Vasilevsky. It really does. Today's a good example of why that has a lot to do with Vasilevsky. He's just been excellent. Through most of the season, he's been fantastic. He's had a couple of rough starts, but he plays a lot, and I think that's going to continue to be the case the rest of the season. I would not be surprised if Tampa ends up being in the market for a goaltender on deadline day. I would not be surprised to see them pick up another goaltender, only because McElhinney's been kind of iffy, and most teams this year are looking to have 3 goaltenders. So I would be very surprised if Tampa doesn't pick one up like Colorado did picking up Dubnyk. I'd be very surprised if Tampa doesn't do something similar. They'll, of course, have to launder that goaltender's contract through 5 or 6 different teams. So by the time they get that guy, they've lost all their draft picks for the next 5 years, but they only owe him $50. That's what Tampa's going to start doing. They'll just make sure everybody else is paying the contract for their players. They pay every guy $50, and then everybody can scream about them screwing around with the salary cap, and then they end up winning a Stanley Cup, and then everybody gets mad all over again. So, number 2, I'm only half kidding on that. You see what they did today in that trade for Savard. I was like, that's some serious money laundering. That's insane. So, number 2, very good week for them. They went 4-0 this week. They move up 4 spots from last week, and that's Toronto. And again, I know the comments, I know the criticisms of how weak the North is and all that. I can only go by their record in the North. I can't punish them for being in the North. And I can't punish them on a week they go 4-0. They had a very good week. So it was an excellent week for Toronto. We'll see how they do this upcoming week. But for this week, yeah, I'm fine with them being number 2. I have not had them at number 1 as often as I think it's TSN that keeps putting them at number 1. I don't think Sportsnet's had them at number 1 as often as TSN. But that's why my power rankings come out on Saturdays. I make sure my power rankings come out, and I do mine before the other Canadian websites do theirs, because I want to make sure that mine come out first, and then, I see theirs, that's interesting. So that there's no influence on me by other power rankings as well. So yeah, Toronto ends up being number 2. I think they're the best team in Canada. There's no reason they shouldn't be able to come through Canada. You look at the addition of Wayne Simmons. You look at how well Spets is playing. You look at the addition of Thornton. It doesn't matter if Thornton's not scoring. You look at that leadership addition to that team, and you look at the season that a guy like Zach Hyman's having, and their underrated blue line, and then the Jack Campbell story. They should be able to get out of the Canadian division. We'll see how it goes. So who's number 1? Well, they went 2-1 this week. And that one loss was ugly. But while a lot of people expected me to take Colorado based on that one loss and just drop them, I really didn't. I thought, they went 15 games without a regulation loss. Yeah, that regulation loss wasn't pretty. They still went 15 games without a regulation loss. So they rebounded from that game as well. They got a shutout in their next game. And that shutout to me said, you know what? Yeah, no, I'll leave them where they're at. I'll leave them in first this week and say, you know what? They have one regulation loss, and what is it now? Like 17 or 16 or whatever it is. 17, I think. I can't pull them out of first place. Not at this point. So Colorado to me is still the team to beat in the National Hockey League. And they've been fantastic ever since I did a video on them, because that's how that works. It doesn't work for teams I cheer for. I've tried. Teams I cheer for never get better after I do a video. It's like the hockey gods go, we know what you're trying to do, and no. Whereas when I cover a team that's doing really well, they immediately seem to turn bad after I talk about them doing well, and vice versa. If I talk about a team having a problem, it's not actually related. I know that. There is no correlation between the two. I know it's a coincidence. It's more that Colorado went through their rough patch, and now they're over it. And that one loss, probably going to make them angry for the rest of the year. So we'll see how things go for the Avalanche from here, but they're number 1 on the power rankings. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.